But we do want to begin this hour once again in Uvalde, Texas, where the U.S. President Joe Biden and the First Lady are visiting today. Both Joe and Jill Biden are there to console a community gripped by grief, pain, and anger following Tuesday's shooting rampage at an elementary school. Right now, the Bidens are due to meet survivors of the attack and the relatives of victims. They are also attending a mass in the community and visiting a makeshift memorial at the scene of the shooting itself. And this is the Bidens earlier today laying a floral tribute as they paid their respects to the 19 students and 2 teachers who lost their lives in this week's attack. With that, let's go right now to CBC News' senior correspondent Susan Ormiston, who is in Uvalde for us today. Susan, thank you for being here. For the second time in less than 2 weeks, Joe Biden finds himself in this role of consoler-in-chief to a community mourning a mass shooting. Describe, if you will, what you've seen so far and the receptions the Bidens have received in Uvalde.
Yes, the Bidens were here earlier today, right on this corner, laying the wreath, marking and honoring the 21 people who were killed here not even a week ago. It's really hard to imagine that. And over here, behind a barricade, were hundreds of people who'd come to see the president, but many said just to lay flowers themselves at this memorial. And when Biden arrived, I was in that crowd, and you could hear cheering as he got out of his vehicle and walked towards the memorial. But not long after, the governor of Texas, a Republican, Greg Abbott, joined the Bidens at this scene, and there was loud booing in the crowd, people saying, "Vote him out." Lots of criticism of Abbott, some people blaming him for the very open access gun laws in this state. Remember that the shooter carried a AR-15 assault rifle, which he had bought just after he turned 18, completely legally in this state. So there's a lot of anger boiling up about not only gun laws, but also the police response to the shooting here at the school, that they waited more than an hour to confront the gunman inside that classroom. Many parents living with the torment now of whether maybe their children might have survived the shooting had the police moved in much sooner. And now the U.S. Department of Justice is saying they will hold a thorough investigation, an independent investigation into all the police agencies who responded at the scene that day, Michael.
Now, you spoke about the booing there, and of course the shooting in Uvalde has sparked so many things. On the one level, this grief, but also anger and pain over, as you say, police failures and calls for stricter gun control. So you've been talking to the people in that community, Susan. What are you hearing from them?
You know, we've been down at the town center many hours in the last few days, talking to people, the hundreds, really thousands, who have come to honor the victims, to pour out their grief, really. Even people not from Uvalde. We've spoken to so many, and today several suggesting to us that they feel that there was a real gap in the police response here at the school, that some feel angry, some feel a bit torn because they know that it's hard to second guess the police, but clearly there were options for the police to address an active shooter that weren't taken. And we spoke to one young woman whose mother is a retired teacher, and she was very emotional and told us about her mixed emotions.
It's frustrating and angry, and at the same time you feel so much grief, but you feel so much anger for the situation. And nobody should have to go through this, and certainly little kids should not have to go through this.
One man in the crowd here today told me, you know, it's easier for me to get a gun with a 30-minute background check and walk out of the gun shop than it is for me to get a doctor, which takes 2 to 3 weeks. So clearly this gun control debate is fired up again in this country. Sadly, in previous mass shootings like the one that happened here, there was very minimal change to the gun laws. The people here really hope that something will be done, including increasing security here at the school. there were lapses as well on that day.
Susan, thank you so much for the coverage today. CBC News senior correspondent Susan Ormiston in Uvalde, Texas. Now, the CBC's Natalie Collada has also been watching the situation in Uvalde very closely, also tracking the ongoing reaction not only to the shooting itself, but also the debate now over stricter gun laws in the United States. Let's bring her now with the very latest on that front. Natalie.
Well, we know, Michael, what is undeniable is the grief, the enormous grief that is precipitating through this community. There is a growing memorial in Uvalde today, people continuing to pay tribute to the children as well as the teachers killed in that shooting. We know, as you just saw, Joe Biden entering the car there headed toward the community, but he's not the only big name to pay tribute. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, earlier this week paid her respects, but beyond that, everyday American people have been outpouring of grief. They have been expressing that outpouring of grief. It has been tremendous. We know that there have been residents of Uvalde that have come to pay tribute. Families have come. People have also traveled from other communities to pay their respects, deeply touched by this loss, which is great. But also, Michael, what is also great is the anger about the length of time it took police to enter the school, over an hour, despite reports of children calling 911 from inside, saying that there were children still inside. One of the children inside the school was 9-year-old Ileana Isabella Ferrero. She and her father spoke to news crews about how they were feeling and how this is all going. Have a listen to what she had to say.
He just walked in, he asked, and then he walked out because I think a policeman was chasing him because when the police, after he left, a policeman came in and went behind the stage and saw us.
The shooter had an hour, almost an hour, 40 minutes, and people were fighting, and there's a lot of questions right now.
Questions, Michael, but also concern over that timeline and growing frustration over the resistance to modify and implement further gun control measures in the United States. According to one group that tracks U.S. school shootings, so far this year, there have been 27 school shootings in the United States, 119 since 2018. Guns are now the leading cause of death among children in the U.S., Michael.
Now, how likely is it, though, Natalie, as you talk about these numbers, and staggering when you consider the amount of violence being witnessed and brought upon children in schools right now, how likely is it that any of this anger and emotion that we're seeing might actually materialize into concrete reform?
That is, of course, the big question. What we do know is that according to Harvard University, the vast majority of Americans support something called the universal background checks for guns. And officials now say that those conversations around that are starting to happen in Washington, expanding those background checks. But this idea of banning assault rifles, that's not on the table. And that is something that is upsetting to many Americans, including one man who approached Republican Senator Ted Cruz. Cruz spoke at the National Rifle Association's conference in Houston, Texas, just a 4-hour drive east from where the shooting happened earlier this week. He told the NRA, that communities needed weapons to stay safe. And that upset some individuals, including this man who confronted him in a restaurant. Have a listen.
You can make it harder for people to get guns in this country, sir. You know that. No, you know that. But you stand here. You stand at the NRA convention. Why? When 19 children died. 19 children died. It's on your hands. That is on your hands. That proves that's on your hands.
And Michael, funerals start tomorrow for those children, including those teachers as well. 21 funerals are planned over the next 2 weeks or so.
Natalie, thank you for that. The CBC's Natalie Collada in Toronto.